Let's now turn our attention to Kenya, where a plan to save forests and fight climate change is being linked to the removal of indigenous people from their homes. The Ogiek community have lived in the Mau forest for generations, but they now find themselves on the wrong side of forest restoration efforts and say rangers from Kenya Forest Service are destroying their houses, leaving them displaced and destitute. We reached out to the government for comment but have not got any response yet. VW's Felix Maringa reports from Sasimwani village in the Mau forest complex.
Samuel Ngusilo says rangers from the Kenya Forest Service destroyed his house, leaving him with practically nothing.
All my kin are buried here. Nowhere else do I know that my grandmother and my great-grandmother are buried. Where else will I go? I grew up being told this is my home, so where else do they want me to go?
Silantoi says she was in her house with her 5 children when the rangers came.
They left nothing standing. Neither would they leave anything behind. They even stole hoes, axes. They were boiling our maize to eat. They took our cooking pots, saying they would be using them.
We asked the Forest Service about allegations its rangers destroyed these houses, but they failed to reply. This is what the Forest Service is supposed to protect, the vast Mau forest complex. The Kenyan government says people living there have been damaging the forest. The president told them to leave while visiting the region.
Those still in the forest should plan to vacate as soon as possible, as we will put up a fence, and that is not a request.
The reason? Human rights lawyers suggest connections with international carbon markets set up during climate change summits. These have made forests valuable.
We know that the Ogiek are being evicted, likely in the name of conservation. We also know that there's a lot of interest from those who are engaging in carbon trading in Kenya and in Kenya's forest and other assets. So I think if you place it in the wider context, I think it's fair to say that there are concerns that the Ogiek's land may be being taken away for carbon credits.
The Ogiek People Development Program is trying to persuade the government to stop evicting indigenous people.
We hope that the government will see that it's a matter of importance to stop eviction of indigenous communities in Kenya. Second thing, we expect the government to invite members of the community to a negotiation table so that consultation happen and a roadmap on resettling communities, those communities in forest, by way of giving them land, by way of compensation for damages, etc., happens.
So far, efforts to stop the evictions and talk about compensation have failed. These are the remains of a house that was recently demolished by the Kenyan government belonging to one of the Ogiek community members. Now, on 2 occasions in 2017 and 2022, the African Court on Human and People's Rights asked the Kenyan government to do reparations for the damages caused to the Ogiek community. But instead of compensation, destruction has continued to take place, and the community members are constantly living in fear. These women told us rangers threatened them with arrest if they didn't leave their homes. They've taken what they can carry into an uncertain future.
I am now joined by Ochieno Namwaya, East Africa Director, Human Rights Watch. Hello, sir. Now, as we heard in the report, the Ogiek people say they are being violently evicted and in some cases even abused. Your organization has been investigating these claims. What have you found out?
The issue of the Ogiek is very strange, actually, because the government simply is ignoring court orders. And they're also ignoring an ongoing court process and other orders that have been directly served to government authorities. They are going on with evictions at no notice at all, following no law, no guidelines, the same way they've always done, and using the police and wildlife service to evict people without giving them adequate time to locate, not showing them where to go. are not providing any resettlement support.
I mean, talking about court rulings, the East African Court of Justice recently also ordered the Kenyan government to stop the evictions and pay the Ogiek people compensation. But is the government obliged to follow that order?
Well, the government hasn't even responded in any meaningful way and hasn't stopped evictions or showed any signs that they're planning to compensate the evictees. And that is basically in line with what we are seeing with the current administration, where I think economic benefits of anything ride the rights of people of any nature. And I think what we are seeing with the Ogiek, we have understood that the government actually is planning, is considering using that part of the forest for carbon offsetting program. So they are evicting the Ogiek, not necessarily to conserve the forest, but for carbon trade, which is really very strange because the carbon trade will be benefiting the communities, not hurting the community.
So basically, you're trying to say there's a bit more of a shady reason that the government is trying to drive the Ogiek people out. Is that right?
Definitely. That the government itself says that they're doing that to conserve the forest. But we have credible information to suggest that actually they are evicting the Ogieks because they have entered into an agreement with an international company to do carbon trade. That part of the forest being part of the forest that they are going to enter into that program.
Just a quick one on this. You talking about the shady reason the government may have for driving the Ogiek people away. Assuming that was the actual reason, would that make sense to drive the Ogiek people to achieve that?
No, it would not, because if the forest is going to be used for carbon offsetting, then it's the Ogiek people as the residents of that place who should make that decision. Or if the government wants to drive the process, then that process ought to be in consultation with the Ogiek people. And the Ogiek people need to consent. All the information need to be given to them so that they understand why they need to vacate and why the forest is being reserved, so that they make that decision knowing what the forest is going to be used for. And then the government needs to provide a benefit sharing formula where the Ogiek, after the carbon credits have been sold, how the Ogieks are going to benefit. That has not been done. They're just being thrown out.
At the end of the day, who wins in such a case? The government says this is what they want to do with the forest. They want to protect the forest. Ogiek people say, hey, this is where we've been all our lives. We don't want to leave. What happens now? What options do the Ogiek people have left?
You have to remember that any government projects, development projects, have to be done in a manner that respects the people, the rights of the people. And the Ogiek being the indigenous people, there are basic standards that the government ought to have followed. These standards are international standards that Kenya has signed. So Kenya, by ignoring its own laws and ignoring the international laws, they are actually liable to serious repercussions, not necessarily locally, but even internationally.
Okay. Otieno Namwaya, East Africa Director, Human Rights Watch. Thank you.